Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly. Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast, the podcast to help you cruise a little smarter. And it's just me tonight. Christy and Chris are very busy doing Christy and Chris things, but we are going to talk with one of our favorite guests. He's been on our show several times, and I'd like to welcome back to the show all the way down in Texas. How are you doing today, Dennis?
I am doing great. Thanks very much for having me back.
No, I really appreciate you doing it, and the many times that you've been on our show to talk about your guys' cruises. And to help me talk about it today, I had to bring in another expert of the Disney Wish and the Hyperspace Lounge, and it's helped us with a lot of different podcasts. Welcome back to the show. How are you doing tonight, Chad?
Expert in big quotation marks. I've been on the ship for 3 days, but I guess that qualifies me as an expert. No, I'm thrilled to come on with you guys and talk a little Wish and some of the awesome venues that are on the ship.
Before we jump into it, Dennis, why don't you give everybody a little bit of background if they haven't heard a previous episode with you, just who cruised with you on this sailing and previous sailings and kind of some of the different sailings you guys have been on.
This was our 5th sailing. So now we were Gold Castaway Club members, and that was fantastic. It was, as with all my previous sailings, my wife, Beth, and my sons, DJ and Alec. And what made this one particularly fantastic was DJ had just finished his first semester of college, and Alec had just finished his first semester of high school. This was a great opportunity to spend some time with them after not having a ton of the previous few months. But like I said, this was our 5th cruise. We'd previously sailed on the Wonder twice in Alaska. Our first cruise was back in 2017 on the Dream. And then we had done a previous Merrytime cruise in 2021 on the Magic over Thanksgiving. So yeah, that is my cruising history.
I love it. Congratulations on being Gold. That's a huge step up.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I'm really excited now because upcoming cruise, I got to book things a little bit earlier than usual. And that was nice, not taking the leftovers.
I think, what do you think, Chad? I think you could pretty much get on all the different cruises you want to once you turn Gold as well, too, which, I mean, except for maybe the Treasure, the opening sailing of the Treasure is going to be tough to get on. But other than that.
Yeah, there's those certain special sailings, like some of those the ones that are going to the South Pacific and things like that tend to get booked up real quick by soon to be the Pearls and then the Platinums of the world. But for the most part, for most cruises, if you're Gold, you're going to get on just about everything. And as far as when you go in to pick all of your port adventures and tastings and whatever else, it's generally wide open. It's been my experience since we turned Gold.
I was just kind of thinking about this. The last couple of cruises that we've been on, Andrew, our oldest, has basically spent most of the cruise with us, which initially when we first started cruising, we didn't see him at all. He's in the clubs and then he would generally meet up with a whole bunch of other kids, and he's got a little bit older and could run the ship by himself. He was kind of doing that. But the last couple of cruises, he's just hung out with us because the clubs haven't interested him necessarily. And it's been a really enjoyable time. So for you to be able to spend that time, Dennis, cruising is just a great way to do that because you get, 4 or 5, however long the cruise is, dedicated kind of days together where you really can kind of connect as a family.
Yeah, and this was really fantastic for us. In addition to academics and everything like that, both my boys are really busy with their martial arts and other obligations that they've got going on. Neither one of them are particularly interested in the clubs. And so we did have a lot of that uninterrupted time. And my wife and I didn't book either Paulo or Remy this time around, so we could have that extra time with them. This was our Christmas present to each other this time around, because as the boys have gotten older, it's been harder and harder to come up with gifts. You ask them what they want. I don't know. And so you end up buying things that they either want to return or they just don't use, but everyone enjoys a vacation. So that's what we decided to do this time around.
Definitely investing in those experiences together, which I love that. We're kind of trying to do the same things too. So, well, let's just jump into it. This sailing was on the Disney Wish, and was it a 3 or 4 day sailing, Dennis?
4 day.
Okay, so 4 days. So did you guys have a sea day the first day, or did you guys get a Nassau?
It was Nassau, Castaway Cay, then the sea day.
Okay. We had a sea day the first day, and then we went. So they kind of changed them up, different editions of it when you booked those. Did you have something, Chad?
Yeah, I think that the Wish, especially as it was starting out, given some of the itineraries have been baked into some of those ports already, I wonder whether they had to switch up kind of some of those initial itineraries. Obviously, the Dream always kind of did had sort of that same pattern with the sea day kind of being the last day, which is honestly one of my favorite parts of that itinerary is when you get that last sea day and you're not sort of being crazy on a castaway day to pack all your stuff up and things like that. But it seemed like there were some variety of those initial wish itineraries. I'm not sure how long that carries on for, though.
So you had the opportunity to listen to everybody's opinions, all the experts out there and their views of the Wish and everything like that before you got to go on it, since it was a couple months. The Wish had been sailing for several months before you and your family went on board. I know that we, as our family, was really excited to try the different restaurants and just to see the new ship and everything like that. What were you guys excited about doing on this sailing and seeing?
A number of things. For us as a family, I'm the Disney fan in the family, and I could do anything Disney and be excited and happy and go back to the theme parks every year and get on a cruise in the Bahamas or the Caribbeans and be perfectly entertained and happy. My wife is much more of a destination type of a cruiser. So again, we picked this cruise because the timing worked out. It was right before Christmas, and again, it was going to be our Christmas present. But we were excited for all the new venues. We've done the Wonder and the Magic, that class of ship were our last 3 sailings. And so we were looking forward to getting back on a bigger ship. The Dream was our first, and we haven't been on the Fantasy yet. So we're looking forward to getting back on the ship. We were looking forward to trying all the new restaurants and the shows. We've seen Dreams, we've seen Believe, we've seen the Golden Mickeys a number of times. And of course, we've seen Frozen now twice recently on the Wonder. So getting the different entertainment, trying some of the different venues, and just exploring a brand new ship that we got to be there for the development of was really, really appealing to us. And then, of course, I am such a huge Star Wars fan. I had to check out the Hyperspace Lounge and then the other Star Wars space that they had in the Kids Club at some point on those. And I was excited for all of that.
I think that was probably, this is the first time Dennis, Chad, you and I were kind of talking about this on the previous podcast. It was really cool to be able to watch the ship actually be built in Germany and then see Disney, kind of give all the insights into what people were going to be able to experience when they were on the ship, and then to actually step on the ship and see it. That was the first time you and I think Dennis also have been able to do something like that. What was that moment like for you guys, Chad?
Yeah, same. So we started cruising with Disney in 2016 and, had booked it. It was really probably about a year or so for that. So the Fantasy was already sailing at that point. So I didn't get a chance to really sort of experience following along with the new ship build and things like that. And our family's gotten really into cruising since then. So it was really neat to sort of follow along and sort of looking for all these little tidbits of information, looking at the Meyerwerf, webcams along the way, trying to find I think that might be the this or the that, as you're kind of staring through the webcam a little bit. But same, it felt like something where, once you finally step on that ship after years of, looking at deck plans that say more magic coming or whatever else, and then you finally get to see what these cool spaces are that the Imagineers dreamed up. I think that was really fun for all of us.
So what was that moment like, Dennis, for you and your family, stepping into the Grand Hall the first time, and then just your overall thoughts of the ship as you got on board her?
Well, again, the previous 3 sailings were either on the Wonder or the Magic. And so it's a much smaller ship. And we walk into this Grand Hall, and we were just blown away by how huge it was. I mean, it was just gigantic. And then also, every time I've been on the Wonder recently, the stairway is like roped off, so you can't get on it. And people were going up and down the stairs, and they had this fantastic chandelier hanging up in the middle of it, and just people all over the place. Not to mention, it was a maritime cruise, so they had this gigantic golden Christmas tree standing up there in the middle of it. But I was just blown away. It was absolutely beautiful. I've seen lots of pictures of it. None of them do it justice until you get in there and you can take it in all yourself. And, I think it was Cinderella and Prince Charming were up there on the balcony looking down, waving to people as you were getting announced. And there's nothing that beats getting your family name announced when you get on that ship as well. And they did a really great job making that central part of the ship really open and spacious. And the design is clean. The white that they used as opposed to the nautical. We're all used to that as Disney cruise fans, having been on a number of cruises, but just the way it just popped with that clean look was really quite fantastic.
I did not bring my tape measure on the cruise, but I swear to God that it's a lot bigger in that space. And I think the reason for that is by losing those midship elevators, that when you no longer sort of have that piece of the what would be the atrium in the old ships is now basically gone. And now when you remove that piece, you can sort of widen that whole space up. And I think it provides a really much bigger, grander experience when you walk into that space. It feels even wider I'm not sure the beam of the ship is really that much different between the Dream and Fantasy versus the Wish, but it's so wide open that you're right. It feels just massive and just a ton of expanse.
I was editing a show today and I totally forgot about this, but one of the comments that the guest made was Kevin down in Los Angeles was that he thought they've sailed on all the different ships too, but he thought that the Wish smelled different than the other ships. I know that's like one of the favorite things that we always enjoy when we got on board. Did you guys, I'm just throwing that out there just on a whim. Did you guys notice that at all, that the Wish smelled a little bit different than the other ships?
There's a feeling I get, and a sensory feeling I get when I get on a cruise, and part of it's the salty air from the sea that's around there. But it had the new car smell, I'll say that much, when it compared to the other ships I've been on. But I hadn't noticed a distinct difference in smell. I think most of the smells that I associate with the other ships are from the various lounges and restaurants.
I don't think I thought of it, but he's probably right. And I think the reason I think that is because every time I smell that signature Disney Cruise Line smell, it immediately triggers for me. And I don't know that I got that, but I don't know that I thought about it until just now, that I never got that on the other ship, or on the Wish, I should say. Because every time I'll walk into the Magic or the Wonder or whatever else, like something triggers in my head, and it's like, oh, there it is. It smells like Disney Cruise Line. And I don't know if I got that. That's a great point. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, I didn't pick it up either. And so if anybody else, this is like total minutia here, but if anybody else out there has any opinions on it, I'd love to hear it. Well, let's turn to the stateroom, Dennis. Your family of four, what kind of stateroom did you guys pick? And what did you think of the staterooms on the Wish?
So we picked a deluxe family veranda up on deck 7 midship. I thought it was fantastic. One of the complaints I keep hearing about these staterooms is that they have a lot less storage space. But that was not an issue for us at all. I mean, on the other ships, we tend to unpack some of our stuff into the area that's below the desk. And then my wife and I usually split the closet. I found that the shelves that they put in the closet more than made up for the space that was lacking over by the desk. And so we each took one, packed our stuff in there, and then hung up the things that needed to be hung up. And we didn't have any issues. We would just stuff dirty laundry in a suitcase underneath the bed, and that took care of everything that we needed there. So I thought that room was fantastic. It was plenty of space in there. This is probably the last time we could be able to get away with doing a single stateroom. My boys getting as big as they are, that bottom bunk on the couch is plenty big for either one of them, but that top bunk is just about, we've used it up. I don't know if we're going to be able to do that again. The white clean room looked fantastic. Ours was Cinderella themed. I loved what they did with the bathrooms. I love having a shower door as opposed to the curtain on there. And then the nightlight, I've heard some people describe the nightlight and just glow about it. And I was like, it's a nightlight. How great could it be? But then that nightlight in that spare bathroom made a huge, huge difference. And having the light switches in there as well, as opposed to having to trigger them from the outside, was a nice touch that I really appreciated. The TV could have been mounted a little bit better, but overall, the room really worked for us. I really quite appreciated it. I liked the veranda. I liked because we were on the bump out, and so we had the extra space on ours, and that was fantastic. We didn't spend a ton of time out there, but when we did, all four of us could be out there comfortably. So big fan of the rooms.
Did those bump out rooms have more furniture on them? So did it just have the two chairs, or was there more, given there's a little more space?
Yeah, just the two chairs and the little table in between them.
Yeah, I think somebody, and once again, Kevin and his wife Jenica kind of said this, where there's like an elegance to the Wish with the decorations and that feel with the white throughout the ship and everything like that. I that's kind of the feeling I had walking into that room, and the time that we stayed in our room was just, I think that they've really stepped up that feeling, I think, of elegance when you're on that ship too. And to your point, I love the bathrooms. They're great.
Yeah. Well, and the different color scheme on the Wish, I've heard some pushback on that people miss the nautical theme of the previous ships. And I love that nautical theme too, but I didn't miss it here. It was fun having a different type of a ship to explore. And I think it was designed really well as far as their color choices and their art choices and the upholstery and everything else they did with it. I thought it looked fantastic and was really quite beautiful.
Well, let's turn to the restaurants before we talk about the lounge spaces. Chad, you're a huge Marvel fan, and Dennis, being one of the amazing hosts of Podcast Stardust, I know that you're a huge Star Wars fan. You can see all the prints behind you as we're talking here. Chad, why don't you kick off the restaurants, talking about Worlds of Marvel and their experiences there?
Obviously, the new restaurants on the Wish versus the previous ships that you were on. So, talk a little bit about kind of maybe go through kind of your dining rotation and what some of your favorite thoughts were with those new restaurants.
I enjoyed all the restaurants. Fun story. When we got on the Wish on that Monday, that we decided to go to Arundel to have lunch as opposed to going up to Marceline Market. We typically do that. We go do the sit-down lunch instead of doing the buffet. So we walked in there, and then there was two larger groups that were waiting to get seated in front of us. But then this gentleman in the white jacket, and one of the head servers, walks up to the that host desk that they have at the front of Arundel, and he started talking. I was like, I know this guy. And it turned out he was the server we had on our very first cruise back on the Dream back in 2017, rather. His name's Linval. He's from Jamaica. He looked up and I could tell there was a flick of recognition in his eyes. And I said, you were on the Dream in 2017. And he came right around and gave us all big hugs. This is the first time that's happened to us, where we've had people that were on a previous cruise that we recognized. And that was fun. It just got the cruise off to such an incredible start. And so we reminisce because back in 2017, he and his assistant server had just flown in from South Africa that morning, and they were wiped out. They had a really long day that first day, but then he was fantastic the rest of the time. So it was really fun to catch up with Linval, and we really liked Arundel. It was nice to be able to see it when there wasn't 1,000 people sitting in there that time for lunch. But then dinner that night was at World of Marvel. I've got two teenage boys. And so, we're all really, really big Marvel fans. We thought that show was fantastic. We really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the food. I think I had the one that was themed after Doctor Strange, which was the scallops. And I can't remember exactly what they called it. And I did seafood most of the nights, with the exception of the last night of it, and enjoyed it every single time. But that show was fun that they do in World of Marvel. It's not going to necessarily knock your socks off, but when you've got the actors that were in the MCU putting on this performance, and then, Paul Rudd, what can you say when he's leading this whole thing and his brand of comedy? He was just fantastic. It was fun. It was enjoyable. It lends itself to doing other shows should they want to change it up in the future. Again, we're big MCU fans. So even when they weren't going through the presentation of the story, they would have all of the different characters up there on the screens, and they were talking about their weapons and stuff like that. That generated all kinds of conversation at the table for us, since we've seen all those movies. And I really appreciate that step that Disney has gone to expand the IP that they're bringing into the cruise ship. As much as I love all the classic Disney animated tales, they are 50, 60 years old, 70 years old in some cases in this. And so bringing something that's relevant, bringing something that's fresh, and that my boys grew up with, because they haven't seen Bambi, they haven't seen Cinderella, but they've seen all the Marvel movies and they've seen Star Wars. So I appreciated that step, that they are branching out and making this cruise have a little bit more something for everybody. But as far as Arundel, I think might have been my favorite of the three rotational restaurants. We ate there twice. So the second and the third night, I had seafood both night. We had fantastic servers. I pretty much went with whatever they recommended, and it typically was the seafood. And they always brought us an extra entree or something to try when beyond what my wife and I ordered. The last night in 1923, we had a really great table in a really great location in the Roy Disney side of the dining room. And my favorite part of the dining experience on that cruise was that Elsa, who was the assistant server, recommended the Lillet wine flight they had there. And it comes with a little bit of a snack with each one of the different wines that they pour. Okay, so I had pre-ordered a wine package for this cruise, and on the last night, my wife told me to get something red, so I had ordered a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon. Didn't realize I was going to have to finish that off and do that flight by myself. So I had an incredible evening, but I would go back on the list just to get that wine flight again from 1923 and try that again because it was absolutely delicious.
I don't remember that at all. Do you, Steve?
I was just going to bring that up because I don't really remember that they have on the other ships. But when we were in Arundel, Lake and Katie they had like a flight where it was 3 different wines. No, you know what? It was a beer flight. And then the very last thing was actually a whiskey. And I don't remember seeing that on the ships. And I think that's a really cool touch that they've added on the Wish, at least.
Yeah, I mean,
Gianna's has something like that. So they've got like a rum flight or something like that. I got in there one time.
Okay.
So it maybe it's something that they're trying to sort of expand on, but I think it's a really neat idea.
yeah, I think like one of the pairings was M&Ms with Chardonnay, and it was. I was like, oh, they brought me M&Ms, but the chocolate and the wine paired really quite well.
Sounds like a Thursday night in my house.
Hey,
it's Thursday night.
It's Thursday night. Hey, I want to go back to, because, like one of the things that people keep saying about Worlds of Marvel, and I want to pick both of your guys' brains on this, is that, they hope that they redo the show because it's going to get old if you go back and see that same show over and over and over again. But I mean, the reality of it is, one of my favorite shows is Animator's Paladin, The Magic of the Wonder, because it's just the classic show and everything like that. But the reality of it is that's the exact same show over and over and over again as well. But the one thing that they can do with Worlds of Marvel is, as the new movies come out, as you were talking about, Dennis, is you're sitting there, eating and in between the show bits that they've already got pre-staged, they're showing the different clips from the movies. So they can definitely, like with all the new movies as they come out, they can definitely introduce those into your experience as well, which I think is going to be kind of cool.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's a great concept, and it is very expandable and something that, I don't know. What do I know? I've never put together a movie before or one of these type of presentations, but it's something that seems to me would be something that can be updated on a regular basis. It doesn't have to be every year, but every couple of years they could, with the new properties on Disney Plus, with new films in the theaters, there's all kinds of things that you could do with that space. The other thing is, like with Arendelle, we were fortunate. I don't think we had a bad table in any one of the restaurants that we sat in. And I know that there's been some complaints that the tables are close together, but we were on the end. We had plenty of space. We always had the servers going right by us, but that didn't ever bother me. There was a serving station between us and the stage in Arendelle, but we were far enough away that I could always see around the servers in there, and I could always see what was going on with the entertainment. And my boys, they sat down, they had their backs to the stage, but they were able to turn around no problem and catch what was going on. And we like Frozen just fine. But again, we're more of a Marvel Star Wars family top of that. And we were just blown away by the performance there with all the music and everything they did there. I thought that was a great show. It rivals kind of what they do in Tiana's Place on the Wonder for me.
That's Chad.
I look forward to giving Arendelle another chance someday.
Yeah, Chad had the one bad table.
Our experience was not great there. Like I said, I've heard so many people that have these glowing things about it, and it wasn't a great night for us. But again, I think we'll be on the Wish again at some point, and look forward to giving it another chance for sure.
The other thing that we've never really had we've had it on Norwegian when we sailed on it before, but in 1923, when we sat there, our table was like right next to a window, and we were at early dining, so it was still light out. And that was really kind of a cool experience to be watching, like looking out that huge window, watching the sea go by, and then having dinner as well. So I kind of appreciated that little bit of touch on top of all the history and everything like that you could take in, depending upon which part of the dining room you're sitting in.
Our 1923 table, like Dennis's, was fantastic. We actually were separated kind of. There's sort of a middle. I think we were on the Roy side also, but there's like a middle part where there's just like literally it was almost like a booth we were in all by ourselves with plenty of space around us and stuff like that. And then, but across the hallway, that's when you would have 2-3 tables sort of stacked one, where you'd have like multiple groups kind of sitting, within inches of each other. In Marvel, we were very much we were up against the wall and then all the way in, and then literally, servers having to sort of squeeze between tables to kind of get back to take our orders or bring our food or drinks or whatever else. They've definitely moved those tables closer together. Does it severely impact the overall experience? No, I don't think so either. But there's a noticeable difference, at least for me, as far as the spacing between those tables on the Wish versus some of the other ships.
I will say this, we did benefit the first 2 nights that the people sitting at the table directly next to us weren't there, as we overheard them saying they were not fans of Marvel. So they went and did something else to eat that night. And then the second night they went to Palo. And so that gave us a little bit more space and did help our perception of things overall, I suspect. But even without that, like I said, I think we were pretty fortunate in where we were seated for dinner all 4 nights, I should say. Yeah, because I know you can go into the app and make that type of request now, if at the great table or closer to the entertainment or whatever. I think I may have requested, I can't remember, but Yeah, I can see where some people would prefer to have a bit more space in there, but fortunately for us, that wasn't an issue this time.
Well, let's turn to some of the lounges. Definitely, as you said at the very beginning, you guys are excited to go to the Hyperspace Lounge. We really enjoyed our time at the Bayou Lounge as well. We went up to Currents a couple of times, sitting outside in the evenings. That really made our cruise. What were some of your thoughts about the different lounges? And then let's definitely touch on the Hyperspace Lounge.
So in some shape or fashion, I managed to get into every single one of the lounges. And one was a tasting. We wandered into the Rose to see it. And they ended up actually having a tasting that we hadn't reserved. So we walked in, saw what was going on, and left. But I overall liked the lounges. If I had one criticism of them is that I feel like on the other ships, most of them have better views of the sea. And that wasn't always the case with the lounges here. You know, the Bayou, is fantastic as it is, it's right in the middle of the ship. And so you don't really have any views from there, except for you get a view of the hyperspace door, and then you got a view of some of the shopping that's near there. But we did I think we maybe drank cocktails once in the Bayou. I can't remember what evening that was. It was between the show and dinner, but we enjoyed it quite a bit. They had a guy playing piano there, and he was a fantastic entertainment. But then we went to the Keg and Compass on our last day. I got some wings. We ordered one of the giant pretzels. And even though the beer wasn't the most fantastic that I've ever had, we really liked the pretzels. And so we ordered 2 more. We enjoyed that space quite a bit, being able to catch up a little bit on the Sports Center, what was going on, what we'd missed over the previous few days. For the Nightingales, that's where we had the chocolate and liqueur tasting. My wife and I had that and really liked the space. It's small, but it was pleasant. And we had, I can't remember the lady's name that was leading the tasting, but she was really entertaining and enjoyed that quite a bit. But I mean, overwhelmingly, we spent most of our time in the Hyperspace Lounge. We were there 4 times over the course of the cruise. And that doesn't include the 2 times we just kind of walked through it just to walk through it. I know, I feel like it gets a bad rap, and maybe I'm an apologist for it, but I thought that space was so much fun and such an incredible addition to the ship.
So, running a Star Wars podcast, as you do, Dennis, I guess I think it probably gets lost on a lot of us that aren't maybe as well in tune with everything that's going on with Star Wars and the Star Wars universe and like that. But what were some of the touches, walking into the Hyperspace Lounge there that really stood out to you that they've added into that space?
So when we walked into it we boarded the ship, and then we were just starting to explore, and we found the Hyperspace Lounge, and we walked in, and it was full at the time. So we just kind of looked around for a bit, and then we left. But immediately what jumped out at me is just, that incredible screen that's behind the bar that is like you're looking out the side of a starship, and, whatever world you're looking at, there's various ships flying around. And that by itself, just picking out all the Easter eggs of the different ships from the different movies, the different animated series, the different live action shows that were there, some really deep dives. Getting to talk about those with my boys and my wife, who's also a big Star Wars fan, was fun. There's an instrument that is really a deep dive. It's kind of a guitar looking thing that is native to the planet Naboo from the prequels that's in there. We liked that centerpiece against the wall that's opposite the window that has the different holograms of the ships that are appearing out the portal, the space portal that you're looking at. Plus, just going so far as to set up in the corner this contraption that looks like it's brewing different types of Star Wars space ales and alcohols and things like that. It was fun. It's not Oga's Cantina, which is what you would expect if you were watching the original Star Wars, A New Hope, and this lived-in universe where everything's kind of broken down, dirty, and grimy. This is supposed to be a luxury starliner in there, capturing the spirit of Canto Bight from The Last Jedi, or capturing Dryden Voss's ship from Solo. It's got that elegance to it. And that, I think, does get lost on a lot of people, that you're not walking into the cantina where droids aren't allowed, and anyone can get into a fist fight at any moment, or blasters are going to get fired. It is supposed to be more of an upscale experience there. I love the look of the furniture. That is, it's all those curves, and it's futuristic looking. It's not a wooden table and chairs. They really went out of their way to make that look fantastic. They serve you wine. If you get wine there, they bring this crazy looking carafe that, is not something you're going to get anyplace else. And then they top everything else off with that cocktail smoke gun. They brought that out and let the kids play with those smoke bubbles all the time. So those are the type of touches I think make it fantastic for Star Wars.
Chad, you spent a lot of time in Hyperspace Lounge. What were some of the things that you enjoyed as well?
I 100% concur with Dennis on a lot of those points. I think what gets lost on people is that we are sailing on, quote, a castle on the sea, right? Oga's Cantina is not going to be within the castle on the sea. This is much more upscale, and it was meant to be the way that it is, and not meant to be kind of, hey, some smuggler's haven and things like that, right? But yeah, we spent a lot of time in there. Like Dennis, we went in there on embarkation day, and it was packed. I think we were still like wheeling around a piece of luggage, and we stayed for a couple of minutes, took a few pictures, and then said, okay, we'll be back. Honestly, didn't make it back there until our last day, because there's so much to see on that ship that we weren't quite finding the time. So we went down there, or I went down there, I should say, on our last days. But we decided to sort of skip the show. And I went down to the Hyperspace Lounge and really wanted to try, Steve, as you know, that I'm a big craft beer fan. So I wasn't going to leave that ship without trying both of those beers. So went down there to have a little fun, and just sat there, and it was dead. And it was because people are getting ready to go to dinner or the show, and nobody's around. And I was able to sit there for, I mean, I think they still technically tell you 45 minutes. Nobody told me to get up and leave, because there wasn't a problem as far as being in there. So I went there, I sat there and watched, those scenes go past at least once through all of them. And then they were already starting to loop around again. I wish there were more. It feels like there's probably the ability to do some more with that. Like Dennis said, I thought that screen looked fantastic. I'll say that we went to Space 220 at Epcot, and I was led to believe it was kind of going to be a sort of similar graphics and just the overall graphic ability to it. There's probably a word there that I'm not thinking of. But I actually thought it was better. Like, I thought that some of the stuff that was shown in Space 220 is almost cartoonish, whereas this was not. This looked like a film, like film quality graphics that were on there. When you'd see, superstar destroyers going past and TIE fighters and other ships, and they bring a lot of different ships from Star Wars lore. I probably missed most of them because I was enjoying my beer, but a ton of fun, and just the ability to sort of see each of these sort of scenescapes go by, and you start to feel the rumble of jumping into hyperspace, and then boom, you're someplace else. Really, really neat, and really enjoyed our time in there. I think some of the things that Dennis was just talking about, like the holograms of different ships and stuff, I don't know if I even saw that. So I think there's more probably that I should have been looking at it around there to really try to take in all of that, all that it is.
Yeah, the other things I'd point out about that space is that I think it suffers because you've got the Galactic Star Cruiser as well, and that's got a lounge in it, and everyone that's there on that is trying to give you an experience, a storytelling experience. Well, that's just not what's happening on any lounge on any ship in the Disney fleet. It is much more of a come enjoy the environment type of a situation. I on my own podcast, I equated it to, it's kind of like the Hard Rock Cafe. You're not going there to live the lifestyle of a rock star. You're going there to see the memorabilia while you're dining or you're drinking or doing whatever the case may be. That's what you kind of need to set your expectation at when you're running into the Hyperspace Lounge. The other thing I'd point out is that what I found on my previous sailings, and was also true on this, is that if you like a lounge, keep going back there and get to know the staff that's there. And there was a couple of them there in the Hyperspace Lounge. After the same lady waited on us the first two times we were there. So we got to know her, and she was asking us lots of questions. The third time we were there, someone else was serving us, but she still came by and talked to us. That helps out with the experience. They were bringing us extra snacks, and they were bringing us other things, and they were making other types of recommendations and talking to us about the ship. That helps out quite a bit. The other two things I point out is that, we sat in the booth up against the far wall, which is nice because it's a little bit elevated up above the floor. So if you're not at the bar, you can still get a good view of the screen. However, the closer you are to the screen, the more impressive everything that is on there. And so we sat on the floor our last time. So we kind of had to look over and around people to see what was going on. But what we could see was absolutely fantastic. The 4 times that we went, we never really had to search for a table. And that included the afternoon of Nassau, because we didn't spend a whole lot of time there. Later in the afternoon of Castaway Cay, when everyone was getting back, we were already back and cleaned up, and we were down in the lounge. And then I think we may have gone twice on Nassau Day, but it doesn't matter. And then the last day, we went in there for some time as well. Yeah, I mean, if you're going after the shows and after dinner and stuff like that, you're likely going to have more competition for the space. But during the day when it's all ages, it's really easy to get the family into at this point.
I think probably it gets missed by a lot of people. It definitely was us. We had a huge group. We were there for 45 minutes because we were on one of the first sailings. And so they were moving people through there. And so like to your point, Chad, I never saw the hologram ships either. There's probably a lot of things in there that I never got a chance to see. And I really didn't get a chance to see too much on the screens. So, just real quick before we move on from the Hyperspace Lounge, was there a ship or anything that stood out that really excited you that you got to see that as it flew by on that screen, Dennis?
Well, of course, the Millennium Falcon shows up quite a bit. And, who doesn't love the Millennium Falcon? Whether you've seen the Star Wars movies or you've been to Galaxy's Edge, there's that. And then, of course, the Razor Crest from The Mandalorian shows up and experiences some trouble. And then before it flies on. And so those are the two that I was most excited to see. But there was some deep cuts that like I said, I'm not going to spoil it in case I want everyone else to get a chance to see these things. But there were some ships that I was really, really surprised to see that they threw in there. And I just loved it. I mean, being there with my boys and my wife and getting to talk about all these things that we'd seen in Star Wars over the past 15 years as they showed up and just sparked so much fun discussion. I cannot wait to get back on the wish someday just to go back to the Hyperspace Lounge and do all that all over again.
I love that.
Something that occurred to me too was that it almost gives off a bit of a speakeasy kind of vibe, Steve. And I know that you've talked about this. I hope you've talked about this on the show. There was originally supposed to be a speakeasy kind of place that was supposed to be like out the back door of Hooks or something like that. That was going to be like where the Edge or something is now, but they didn't have enough space in where they were supposed to put it. So it almost feels like this somewhat takes the place of that sort of speakeasy, because there's almost like this little secret entrance to kind of get into it that it's easy enough to kind of miss if you're sort of in a hurry and kind of going down that hallway, because the sign for Hyperspace Lounge is inside that little hallway. It's not on the outside. So it almost feels like it's a little tucked away sort of hidden secret that I think is really neat. I think the way that they set that up is really, really kind of cool.
I agree. Let's turn to one other Star Wars space before we talk about the shows and some of the other things that you guys did on the ship, Dennis. And I never made it down to the kids clubs. I'm not sure if you did, Chad, but they also have a Star Wars space down at the kids club. And I know you were able to go down there and see that. What were your thoughts of what they built down there?
Right. Yeah. So when they had the open house down there, they were doing a meet and greet they advertised it with Chewbacca, but it ended up being with Chewbacca and Rey. So we got down there just, 10 minutes or so before it was supposed to open. We got in line. There was already a big line to do that. But we got in. I thought it was a neat space. I mean, I don't completely understand everything that's supposed to happen in there because there's a lot of switches and things on the wall, little monitors that were showing parts of a ship that didn't exist. There were random hallways from something else. It seemed like if you flip switch and toggled buttons in a certain situation, then screens would change and things would happen. Lots of droid parts all over the place. So that was kind of fun picking out the different parts of droids. If you've been to Galaxy's Edge, you've probably seen this, but they have that shop with all the different critters, porgs and lothcats and the likes. And a lot of them were spread out throughout this cargo bay space as well. So it was fun. Like I said, I'm really curious what they do with the kids in there. I mean, I get the feeling that they occasionally have various Star Wars characters come up that interact with them, but this is where they had the photo op with Chewbacca and Rey. That was fun. I mean, here I am, almost 50 something. And, I've got my teenage sons with me and we walk up and Chewbacca gives me a big hug and Rey, she's talking to me in character. I just kind of figured I'd be tolerated, but no, they really got into the spirit of the whole thing and really sold it and made it worthwhile. So if you get the chance during an open house in the kids club, I would recommend going down there and taking a look. It's not something that as an adult or a teenager, you're probably going to have much use for after about 15, 20 minutes, but it's fun to see. And it's definitely worth going down there to check it out.
Did you make it down to Chad?
We tried. So we went down for an open house like Dennis, and there was a line out the door. There's that hallway that sort of connects all of them. So they were like, no, you can't come in. Because we tried to go into the front entrance of where the kids club is, because that's how you always get into all the other open houses. And they're like, no, you got to kind of go back out this way and it's down that way. So we sort of looked in there and I was about to head in and there's this line of people over here. And I'm like, oh, wait, is there a wait to get in? They're like, yeah, there's a character experience coming. It was probably the Chewbacca Rey thing, right? And with that big line, I sort of peeked my head and just sort of look around in there, but we never actually even set foot in it, unfortunately. And then never made it back down for another open house kind of along the way. So we kind of went down to the Marvel area, which has some neat things, but there wasn't really, none of it was kind of running. And they were kind of doing some, actually, Ed, friend of the show, was there doing some photography and stuff like that at the time. So I got to meet him a little bit. So it wasn't really a whole lot going on in the Marvel space to sort of see what they were doing. Like, like Dennis was saying, I'm curious to sort of see what they do with the kids when they're in there. But my kids at this point are all aged out of those clubs. So no opportunities to hear stories from my family anyway.
Well, I think you made a really good point too, Dennis, earlier when you talked about, them adding, movies and experiences that our kids have kind of grown up with, because it's true. My kids have never watched Bambi. I mean, I remember watching it way back when as a kid, but I do appreciate them adding these new experiences that people are being able to see and do on the Wish, or the kids are being able to take part in on the Wish. And it almost, I feel like they need to do a Star Wars D&C on the Disney Wish at some point, but I don't know if
sign me up. I would be there in a heartbeat. Yeah.
I don't know if they could fit that in with a 3 or 4 day cruise. Maybe on one of the 4 days, or maybe a specialty 5 day with a double dip at Castaway.
I really wonder what the future is for Star Wars Day at Sea with the Galactic Star Cruiser and stuff like that. And I wonder if they might start to bring some of those back in future years, because we never got a chance. We did the Marvel one, but I haven't had a chance to do the Star Wars one, and I'd love to at some point.
Yeah, well, I feel like between Galactic Star Cruiser and Galaxy's Edge, we've lost things like Star Wars weekends at Disney World. We've lost the Star Wars Rival Run weekend there at Disney World, and now we've lost the Star Wars Day at Sea. That's fine. They want to channel people into the park and without those type of things. But I've had an opportunity to do the last Rival Run weekend, and I never got to do the Star Wars Day at Sea, and that had been on my bucket list. So something I really wish they'd bring back at some point.
Put it in the surveys. I don't know if anybody listens, but well, let's turn to some of the other activities on the ship. Being together with your boys and your wife and everything like that. What were some of the things you guys enjoyed doing as a family, or maybe even as a couple on the Disney Wish?
Well, I already mentioned the chocolate liqueur tasting. It's something we had previously done on the Wonder. Really, really enjoyed it. So we did it again on the Wish and had a fantastic time with that. We tried not to do a whole lot of things that was going to exclude the kids again, because the whole point of this was to get to spend some time with them after, the previous semester being what it was. But beyond that, we enjoyed the shows. We went to all of those. We did the Pirate Night, was fantastic. We spent a fair amount of time. What do they call it? The neighborhood of food or whatever it is on the pool deck. We would get a lot of food there, sit around a table and watch what was going on Funnel Vision, get the drink of the day, and hang out and just enjoy the environment there. That was one of the things that we enjoyed doing. We tried the Uncharted, the game that's on the mobile app while we were there. Now, they made it clear that it was still in a preview phase. And so, we were very patient with it, but, right off the bat, my wife couldn't get into the game with us. For some reason, she couldn't join our group, even though it advertises that up to 4 people can do it together. And then about halfway through, it kicked out my youngest from the group that we were in. And then we made it all the way to the end. And then neither my son and I could participate in the grand finale event. We sat there and watched it, but it's definitely got some work, but it's fun and it's got a lot of potential. And I'd like to see how they could potentially expand that on the Treasure or whatever the third ship in this class is going to be. So that's fun. We did the Villains Night game show that was in the Luna Lounge. That was hysterical. I'm not sure if I heard anyone else talk about this yet, but it's essentially Hollywood squares, and they've got a different villain in each one of the squares. It's pre-recorded segments. The host would call up 2 people to play, and then you would call on one of the villains to get the X or the O in the square, and they'd ask them a question, and then they'd play the clip there, and there was a few special effects thrown in. We kind of went in and kind of saw what the setup was like. I don't know about this, but we really had quite a good time with that one when it was all said and done.
I've never heard that before.
That sounds super fun.
I remember when the Wish was being developed and they were talking about the Luna Lounge, they were talking about having some sort of a villain game show there, but it was really cleverly put together. So you had Gronk and Yzma, Maleficent, Lady Tremaine and her 2 daughters were the contestants. Hades was the center square. Who am I missing? There's someone I'm missing. But,
Cruella?
Yeah, that's actually it. Cruella de Vil, as a matter of fact. So even they're just sitting there, they would shift around occasionally. And I have no idea how much footage they captured of them. And then they'd make snide remarks to each other based on their answers. And then I won't spoil some of the special effects, but some of the stuff was just really fun. If you find yourself on the Wish and you're playing this game, make sure everybody gets called on, because it seemed like for the longest time we weren't going to get to Maleficent, and she had some of the most fun interactions of the whole thing.
Anything with the villains, I love. It's like stormtroopers too, man. It's just, there's like a snarkiness to them, and I love the playfulness that they can have with people. So I would love to see that.
Mm-hmm. And Gronk steals the show constantly. He got called on all the time.
Mickey and Friends Festival of Foods. That's what you're thinking of.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's do a couple quick bites here, Dennis, before we talk about Castaway Cay and maybe some thoughts there. Did you get to ride the Aquamouse?
No, it was a little cold for us. So there was people that were doing the Aquamouse. We brought the stuff to do it, and every day it was just, with the exception of the sail away day when they weren't running it anyway, it seemed like it was a bit too windy or too cool to try it out. So we're saving that for a future sailing, I should say.
Okay. And are you a coffee fan? There's like a gazillion coffee places, I think, on there.
I am a coffee fan. My wife is a coffee addict. And so we definitely had to go find the Cove Cafe. I got to say, it looks really great in there. She went up there far more than I did. And she took pictures of all the little characters that they'd burn into her, the foam of her latte. My oldest went up a time or two with her to get a mocha or something like that. There's a couple of places that she got coffee from as well. I usually just have a cup with a breakfast. It is a bit of a hike to the Cove Cafe on this layout of the ship, but I absolutely love like all the furniture that they put out there outside that you can sit on. It's super comfortable. If I didn't have the kids with us, I could just see myself, grabbing something to drink and hanging out there and then taking a nap in the middle of the afternoon.
Yeah, the furniture on the ship is amazing. I mean, I want to get that for my backyard to put on our deck, because whether we were back by the Cove Cafe or up by Currents, that was some great, comfortable furniture. I love that addition that they put on there. How about Very Merrytime? I know you guys have been on a Very Merrytime cruise on the Magic, right?
Yeah.
And how was that? I mean, that was one of the things that we really enjoyed when we were on the Fantasy over Christmas time this year, was just, putting us into that mood of Christmas and everything like that. Was there anything special that stood out in your mind as far as the Very Merrytime aspect of it?
Quite a bit, actually, because the first Maritime cruise we did was, again, on November 2021 over Thanksgiving. There was still a lot of those COVID restrictions in place. And so while there were Christmas decorations up and there was a tree, the actual Christmas activities were quite a bit reduced. And so I was not expecting the volume that we got on this Maritime cruise. And so starting off with that first night when they had the tree lighting ceremony, I mean, I didn't even realize that they were going to light up the tree. And then we had this huge presentation for it. They got someone out off the floor as a young girl to do a, kind of a who's behind the curtain game. Well, as you can probably figure out, it was Santa and Mrs. Claus. They came out. So that was fun. And then there was a whole presentation with Mickey, Minnie, Donald, Goofy. I don't know. I think Pluto may have been there as well. They performed some, and then they came out and they did the countdown for lighting the tree, which was impressive by itself. But then when you threw in all of the effects that they have there in the Grand Hall, I guess is what they call it on the Wish, colors swirling from all over the walls and down the stairs and everything else, it really was amazing. And so none of that type of stuff was offered when we were on the Magic in 2021. Again, I'm assuming, one, the Magic's not equipped for that, and two, the COVID protocols. But then just the amount of times that Santa and Mrs. Claus were doing story time, or they were doing, we didn't do this, but kids could go up and sit on Santa's lap, those type of things. They did have some other Christmas activities that were spread out there, but the theme was much, much more noticeable overall. The only thing that was different was, again, when we were on the Magic that previous time, they had the holiday fireworks, which they didn't have on the Wish. But hey, when you have the Rockin' Pirate Parlay party, you don't need them. It was really, really, really decked out well. They had a Marvel themed tree over by the Marvel restaurant. I went around the ship just taking pictures of all the Christmas trees and had a good time doing that.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that they had sort of like, extra trees or different themed trees kind of at different spaces. I don't think I'd heard that before.
Yeah, they had one in Arendelle as well, usually somewhere around the entrance.
Neat. We've only done one Maritime Sailing. It was also on the Fantasy. That was probably 5 years ago or so. So I don't recall that on that one, but who knows? But things obviously evolve over time. You were talking a little bit about kind of the magic of the Grand Hall, and I kind of had a similar experience where I was up early in the morning trying to just go in to it was actually on our Castaway day, going to grab coffee from one of the many coffee places. I don't recall which one it was, Singing Sword or no, what's not Singing Sword. Anyway, not important. But the atrium just sort of magically came to life. You started hearing sort of birds chirping. And then all of a sudden, all the lighting and stuff through there, and all the different, I can't remember what they call those lights, but it's just everything starts basically just like coming alive in that whole grand hall. And a wish is a dream your heart makes starts to play throughout the grand hall, and just the chandelier, the wishing star is doing all these magical things and stuff. It was amazing. And I'm basically standing there by myself because there's nobody else around. It's super early in the morning, and just recording this whole thing, feeling like I can't believe nobody else is here to see this. And it probably happens fairly often, but it felt like that was for me. And it was just a really cool thing just to happen upon on the ship.
To your point with the Grand Hall, it's just it's an amazing space, and we're broken record saying that. But one of my favorite things to do on the cruises is I'm an early bird, and I get up and I'd wander around, and I love taking pictures of the various spaces and the things that you find on these ships. I took a couple hundred pictures of all this, and most of the stuff is in the Grand Hall, whether it's the nook that they have that's got all the different things that went into the design of the Wish, and the other side of Walt Disney's restaurants where they have other samples of things that they did when they were planning out stuff from the Wish. And then, I know the gingerbread tower's gotten some flack, but the stuff they had with the Christmas that was there, taking pictures around the Cinderella statue and the cat and the mice that were going on there. There are so many details to find. It's almost overwhelming. They did a really, really great job. And when you're up early, I wandered into the hyperspace lounge and was taking pictures there because there was nobody in the way. A really great time to do that type of thing. And that was just a photographer's dream with all the stuff you could find on that ship.
The technology that they have on this ship is just amazing. And I bet you that Christmas tree lighting must have just been insane compared to what you get on the older ships. So how about the shows themselves, Dennis? Did you guys go see any of the shows?
We saw all the shows. I think they do it better on the Wish than they do it as a whole. The 3 shows are better on the Wish than they are than any collection of 3 shows on the other ships, at least the ones I've experienced so far. I think the Seas the Adventure is fun. It's a new take on some of the songs. I have not seen the other version of Aladdin on whatever ship that's on. So getting to see that here on the Wish was fun. It was, I think, my family's favorite of the 3. I thought that the Little Mermaid story was really quite clever. We actually had really good seats. We were pretty close to the stage for that one. And I really enjoyed it. It seemed, this is going to sound maybe a little condescending, it seemed like a little bit more of a mature take on the shows overall with what they've done compared to any 3 collection of shows that you get on the other ships. I think, the variety act that Seas the Adventure is better than the Golden Mickeys or Villains Tonight or Dream or Believe as far as I'm concerned. My kids agree with Chris that they don't want to see adults playing children in any of these shows, so they were happy not to have that. You know
what I loved about Seas the Adventure was it starts the cruise off great. Instead of just being some random show, it's kind of a show that kind of puts you in the mood to start sailing and start that adventure that you're going to be going on for the next 3 or 4 days. And to your point, fun songs, fun characters coming out and a great little story to it as well. So I really love that show. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see the other 2, but looking forward to it eventually in the future.
But one of the fun, a show that's not actually really advertised anywhere, but we couldn't get enough of was the Fairy Tale Players in the Grand Hall. If we heard their voices when we were walking anywhere, we would make a beeline to go see what they were up to. Once they were down on the floor as opposed to up on the balcony, my wife and son had an opportunity to interact with them, and they talked about that for the next 2 days, nonstop. They really loved it. And one of those performers was actually part of the entertainment staff on the Dream from that original cruise we had. So it was fun to kind of see him back again. And he was also the host of that Villains Tonight game show that they did. So they were great at improv. They're, doing a Disney story in a minute. They did Frozen that way. And I can't remember what the other one was that they did, but we've been mimicking the Frozen in a minute ever since. It was incredibly memorable. They're very, very talented. There was a couple that got engaged right there in the Grand Hall, and they were up on the balcony at the time. And then Donald wasn't noticing the ring, so they were yelling at Donald, and I can't do it justice. They were just fantastic. They were fantastic. They really, really added something to the environment there in the Grand Hall.
Did you run into him, Chad?
A little bit, yeah. So we would go past there. It was we were never down on the main floor with them, but we'd see them when we were up high. I think the other piece is that little balcony that's on top of that stage in the Grand Hall, having characters sort of pop in and up there. When you're up on, God, what would that be? Deck 5, I think it is. And you're almost eye level with where they're at. like you'll be walking past, and like we were up there, and Tiana and Naveen were there, and they're just all of a sudden they're looking over at us and they're waving at us and stuff like it. Just neat little interactions like that. They'll just pop through the door, they'll be there for 10 minutes, and then they're gone. And again, just little things like that just happen throughout your time on the ship that just make those interactions just spontaneous and really, really fun.
I can't remember what they call the characters that used to wander around the streets in Hollywood studios, but Streetmosphere characters. I think that's, if anybody doesn't know what we're talking about. So they have basically it's a guy and a girl that wander around the grand hall during different times, especially in the evenings in between the dinners and whatnot, and interact with people. And then they tell these stories as well. And I've got like a minute tape on one of them. I think I tried to put it on the Facebook page one time, but I'll try and throw it up again for people to kind of see what it is. But those stories happen so fast and they're quick and they're pretty witty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Dennis is spot on. Those stories in a minute, when they retell the films like that are hysterical. So yeah, just there are a ton of, I don't think I got to see those live, but I've seen multiple clips of them on YouTube or whatever else. Hilarious. Yeah. Totally worth finding.
I'll throw it up on the Facebook page, but then also Google it or check it out on YouTube, see if you can find it there, because those are the little touches that I think just really make the Wish a special voyage. And I can tell just from your voice that you guys had just a great cruise. Just a couple more things to touch on before we finish up. Castaway Cay, you guys went to Nassau, but we kind of talked ahead of time that you guys just got up, walked around a little bit. Anything stand out at Castaway Cay this time, Dennis?
Unfortunately, our parasailing adventure on the Stingray, feeding the Stingrays, got canceled due to wind, but we spent 4 or so hours there. We wandered around, got smoothies. So we still have the collector Sven and Olaf mugs here in the house. And I'm really surprised that they're still here. I thought those would have been tossed by now. I had thought about doing the 5K, but we didn't just get down there and then early enough for what I wanted to do it before the sun was beating down. Something that was fun that happened as we were getting off Castaway Cay. We got up to our stateroom and I was just out on the veranda, kind of just watching things. And one of those little doom buggies with Donald and Daisy was coming back. No, I'm sorry, with Chip and Dale was coming back just as Donald and Daisy were getting ready to leave. So Chip and Dale jumped off their buggy and started messing with Donald and Daisy. I took a 1-minute video of this and put it on Instagram, and now it's been viewed almost like 20,000 times. It's got 1,800 likes. I get like 20 likes on things like this. So it's fun to have something that's kind of mini viral on it. But anyways, check out DJ Keithley and you can find it on Instagram. You can find this little video here, but it was so much fun just watching these characters mess with each other and have a good time like that. I had never seen that before on Castaway Cay. And of course, the island was decorated for Christmas, and they have that great tree that's right there outside the ship with all the seashells and things like that are decorating it. But any amount of time you can spend on Castaway Cay is always a good time. The lunch was good, had cookies. But, we were primarily on this cruise for the ship, even though we're primarily, more destination cruisers. But it was fun to spend a little time there.
Well, Chad, what have we missed?
How about the Hero Zone? Did you guys go check that at all?
Yeah, we wandered through it a few times. They didn't ever have the Incredicourse going when we were around. And then when it was running, we were usually doing other things. But that was a neat space. One of my boys' favorite things to do is just explore the ship, wander around, see what they can find. And so we wandered through at least 3 or 4 times. I know once on the way to get coffee at the Cove, but didn't really get a chance to do anything in there.
Yeah, I was the same where both times we went in there, it was just basketball, going on, stuff like that. I think my daughter was there with the teen club one time, and they had the Incredicourse set up. I'd really looked forward to trying to race my kids in that thing to make a fool of myself, but never got a chance to do it. So next time on the Wish, when I give Arendelle another chance, then I'll hopefully get to do the Incredicourse.
I've heard the little kids have got a little bit of shot at winning those things anyway. It's just because it's a little bit easier for them to get through that course.
I've been on those types of things in the past, and just, when you're an adult and you weigh more than 50 pounds and you're trying to climb up like inflated stairs and stuff like that, it doesn't work well. It just the physics just aren't right.
Well, Dennis, anything else that we haven't touched on tonight that you want to talk about, or that you kind of made an impact on you and your family when you sailed on the Wish?
I've mentioned the Pirate Night on the Wish kind of in passing a couple times. I think that is such a major home run, and they seriously need to revisit Pirate Night on the other ships now after this. Between the Mickey and Minnie's Pirate Party that's kind of between the 2 dinner seatings, and then the Pirate Parlay Party that's after that, it's such a huge improvement Oh, I enjoyed Pirate Night the way it was, but this is just such next level. I mean, you could really see all the adults rocking out to all this 70s and 80s rock music on there. I was surprised how much my boys got into it, but they really loved it as well. Just the format of it, the way it introduces the fireworks, they tied together with a loose story, but the performers, the band, were just incredible. I really appreciate them stepping that up. Yeah, so that stood out to me. Yeah, I'll just say this about the Wish. I think it's a fantastic ship. I don't know that I like it any more or less than the other ships that are in the fleet. I think it is a great addition. It brings something new that a lot of the other ships have. The only thing that will prevent me from getting on it again is simply because it runs such limited itinerary, which is Nassau and Castaway Cay. And if you want to go see new ports, that's not really an option with the Wish. But I am excited for the Treasure at some point in the future, which is going to open up those type of possibilities on a similar ship. I think it's something that maybe I benefited from just having turned gold, that I wasn't so ingrained with all the other ships on this, but I would not hesitate to get on the Wish just simply because it's the Wish in the future.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see. You mentioned Pirate Night, what they choose to do with the Treasure, and then Triton number 3, because the Pirate Night is really set up for, and the Magic and the Wonder is very similar, and the Dream and the Fantasy is very similar. Are they going to continue this with the Pirate Parlay into the Treasure and whatever Triton 3 is, or are they trying to set these ships up to sort of each be kind of their own thing and have something unique to each one? I'll be curious to see what they choose to do.
And I did think of one last thing I need to mention. Won my first ever trivia medal on a Disney cruise on the Sailing. It was a great redemption because on my last Maritime cruise, we did Marvel trivia, and I lost in the tiebreaker because I went 1 year over on the year that the Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver were introduced. This time around, there was 20 questions and ended up being 21 possible points because one of the questions actually had multiple answers. It came down to us and one other group, and we went into the tiebreakers. And after 3 rounds, the host gave up because we kept giving all the questions correct. And someone else that was there looked at our other bonus questions, said they're going to get those too. And so we did win our first trivia medal. Yeah, it just felt like a sweet redemption after having lost the previous time.
How stressful was that going into overtime? It's like sudden death overtime.
And they were sitting right next to us too. And so it was a lot of high fives afterwards.
I love that. Was it the new medal that they gave out?
It's the one, it's just got the cruise ship on it. I've seen it online before. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Those are new then. Because the old ones are like the Mickey shaped, said like winner on it or something like that. I think those new ones are really neat.
Those and the 5K battles, I think, are a step up, which are kind of cool. So, well, congratulations. That's like one of the hardest medals to win out there in the world. So now you've got yours to hang proudly. Chad, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, I mean, I really enjoyed, sort of recapping Dennis's trip. It's got me anxious to get back on the Wish at some point. Just got to figure out when.
So 2 last questions for you, Dennis. We always have to ask this. What's next for you and your family, I guess? It's a new year, 2023. We're cruising on into new adventures. What do you guys have planned?
So the last couple of times I've been on your show talking about what's in the future, it's always been the Mediterranean, and it keeps getting rescheduled. And so we were going to do that this summer, and then my son ended up having a college thing come up. So we're rescheduled that for once again. So hopefully 4th time will be the charm. But in March, my wife, myself, and my youngest, Alec, are getting on the Wonder again out of San Diego for a 4-night cruise going to Catalina Island and Ensenada. And then after that, we are, again, for Christmas, we're doing a cruise right after New Year's, 6 nights out on the Magic out of Galveston. So I'm looking forward to both of those.
Oh, that'll be awesome. I've never been to Catalina Island. I've always wanted to go over there. We fly over it as we come into Orange County all the time, but never been out there. So I hope you guys have just a magical adventure on the Wonder and then down to Ensenada as well. And before we get out of here, I definitely want to make sure that I give you an opportunity to plug your podcast. You and Jake do an amazing job over there at Podcast Stardust. If people want to follow along with you guys in your Star Wars adventures, how can they do that?
Oh, thanks. So yeah, Podcast Stardust is our podcast dedicated to all things Star Wars. It comes out 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Usually there's some sort of review episode for whatever's going on Disney Plus with The Mandalorian, The Bad Batch, and that type of thing. We do some sort of a general discussion in the middle of the week, and then we catch up on Star Wars news at the end. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts on any podcatcher. And then our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook is at Podcast Stardust.
Awesome. And you guys did I love the show with the Mandalorian trailer because there's like, Chad and I watched some of this or listened to a podcast that talks about the MCU stuff. And I'm not sure if what's it even called? I can't even remember.
MCU fan show.
Do you listen to MCU fan show by any chance?
No, I haven't
Dennis?
heard of that one before.
Anyways, they'll do like a deep dive where it's like they come up with a trailer for like it's a 1 minute trailer and they talk about it for like it seems like 3 hours sometimes. But there's like so many little hidden things and meanings behind these trailers now. So I really appreciated you and Jay breaking down the Mandalorian trailer the other day because I'm looking forward to that show.
Yeah, we went into that saying we're not going to hit everything, and then we hit everything. I mean, next thing we know, it was 30 minutes later. So it's hard not to get carried away on those type of things.
I got to go find that one because there's probably a ton of stuff that just went right over my head as I watched that trailer. Just I could probably pick up a ton. So I'm going to find that as soon as we're done here.
Well, thank you so much, Dennis, for coming on and sharing your family's experience on the beautiful Disney Wish. I could hear it in your voice, and so many of us who sailed on the Wish just had a magical time. So I'm glad that you guys had that time together, especially over the holidays, and we're able to reconnect with the boys and everything like that. So thanks so much for all you've done for our show. Thanks for all the support you've given us over the years, and really appreciate you coming on and talking about it tonight.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And thank you so much, Chad, for coming on and helping me as well.
Always fun. Thanks a lot, guys.
All right, cheers, and we'll see you soon on the DCL podcast. Goodbye, everybody.
The DCL podcast is not affiliated with the Disney Cruise Line, Walt Disney Company, Adventures by Disney, or Run Disney. All of the opinions expressed on our shows are those of the hosts and the guests who appear on the show. If you have any questions about any of these products, please contact the Walt Disney Company.